Hello, everybody. This is episode 4 of Gaming's Lost Memories, and today we will be discussing Halo Combat Evolved and the Halo franchise in general. So, this is a pretty interesting one because I keep bouncing around on topic ideas, but I don't know if you have ever woken up or just been in the mood for something. And today I woke up and I was like, you know what? I want to talk about early Halo, and kind of what kicked this off too was Halo for the Nintendo DS because it's something that I remember that not a lot of people remember for some reason. Probably because it never came to fruition, but you kind of just get so used to Halo and Xbox, like peanut butter and jelly. Like it's just you hear Xbox, you hear Microsoft, you think of Halo if you're thinking of video games. There's nothing at all that even comes close in terms of like Mario to Nintendo. I don't know what you do for PlayStation because PlayStation kind of has a unique balance. I don't know, maybe Kratos. But yeah, it's Master Chief and Halo and Xbox, and there's a lot of reasoning for that. So we'll go down, down to memory lane. We'll take a trip down memory lane here. So Halo, what is Halo? Halo is a sandboxy type first person shooter where you have, Earth and you have the humans, and then you have this alien species called the Covenant that uses like laser weapons, and, they got their own plans. They're fighting the humans for kind of territory out in space. And there's these gigantic Halo structures, and as Master Chief kind of travels around one of them, he kind of learns what the Covenant plan to do with the Halo rings and what the Halo rings are used for. It is an awesome shooter. It actually got me into shooters, but let's take a step back here. Halo was almost a Mac exclusive. Steve Jobs announced Halo. This sounds like so backwards to what it ended up becoming. But yeah, so there is actually a video of the Halo announcement still. I double checked to see if it was still on the internet because that's one of the things with anything before like the mid 2000s, like back, geez, I don't even know when YouTube came out, like 2005, 2006. But there used to be, video hosting sites like eBaum's World and like 1,000 other that were kind of like that were popular at the time. But it just like you didn't get information, the same way. And there's so many videos. Like I was doing some research for actually the Nintendo DS, which kind of links Halo back into this whole, algorithm. However, going back and looking for like videos or on YouTube at that time of those E3 announcements that I remember watching, it's difficult to find a lot of them, but you can still find the original Halo announcement running on the Mac software. Supposedly, it was supposed to be exclusive. At this time, Halo was a third-person shooter, and you can see it's pretty accurate. Like the source material doesn't surprise you. You see, like Banshees, you see the Covenant elites. They clearly have laser swords. There's a Master Chief type character from Halo Combat One or Halo Combat Evolved, the first Halo. So it's pretty close to the source material, but I don't think they had a lot of like design or gameplay. Like it was pretty basic. It was basically like Master Chief running around 3D environments. It wasn't even the original like Halo that released on the Xbox. What it came to be was a lot more in depth than what that showcasing was. So it was more, I don't want to say like a tech demo because it looked like it was playable, but it was really interesting. Like that could not be further from what the Halo franchise became, being so associated with the Xbox brand that it was almost a Mac exclusive. That's the first thing that sticks out for me. I'm just like, what in the heck? How did that almost happen? No, so I'm pretty sure Bungie, the creators of Halo, so they make Destiny now, which is another phenomenal game. I really like Destiny 1 and 2, especially the first one. But, this was something that they created, and they were in, financial trouble a little bit. So they had to sell some shares of their, stock. I want to say to Take Two Interactive. I'd have to check the wiki in a second. But so long story short, Microsoft knows they want to announce console hardware. So this topic in and of itself is absolutely fascinating because you have the Sega Dreamcast, essentially failing. It comes out, it maybe has like a solid first year, and then the PlayStation, EA, the market, everything just basically stomped that poor console to death. So it had like a really good original opening. So was it 99.99? Man, I miss 1999. But it comes out and has a good. I remember a launch. I remember it having a good launch, but I think those numbers were smaller than we all kind of realize, because after that launch, it really fizzled out. And I remember at one time you could pick one up for like 99 bucks. I'm getting a little off topic here, but long story short, Microsoft, they're going to buy their way into the console video game market. Here's the thing: it was the right time for it. They wanted to release, Xbox Live, so their online gaming platform, and kind of take some of the strengths of PC into the console market space. They released, I think, arguably the most powerful console. I think it had better specs than the GameCube, but I'm not sure. The Sony PlayStation 2 is the weakest, but games sell consoles. And as crazy as this is, that has been the one consistent thing in the video game industry that I feel like Nintendo has gotten right. That like you want to sell games, you want to sell the software because there's a lot of money in that, but you got to get the hardware. So either you go third party, which Nintendo clearly doesn't want to do, or you have games that sell the consoles, but then people buy the games too. So Microsoft was going into this without anything. They didn't have their killer application. They didn't have, the killer app, they call it. They had absolutely nothing. So maybe, if they didn't have Halo, Microsoft could have, purchased their way into the market just by crazy advertising, focusing on what Xbox Live would eventually become and getting those third parties to, make games for that console for that experience, and then also focus on like DVD playback and all that good stuff. Yeah, so Microsoft, they're looking for a way to launch a product. They're fine with either losing money or at least spending a lot of money in the beginning to get this console out there because they're looking at the long-term play. And lastly, they need some piece of software because if you would release an Xbox and eventually it's going to have online stuff, which that would be cool, but you need games. You know what I mean? Because the internet for video games and consoles in general wasn't really that big. And what's interesting about Halo 2 is there weren't really like 3D world shooters because like they didn't figure it out on the how to control it essentially. I think the biggest shooter up until this point was GoldenEye, which worked on essentially one stick and maybe using the not the D-pad, the yellow arrow keys. I forget what they were actually called. But long story short, Microsoft acquires Bungie, and they're like, listen, everything you got going on, you're finishing Halo, because they really thought Halo was going to be the bread and butter of the Xbox. And to tell you the truth, that is just incredible foresight, I think, by Microsoft, because I don't even think I think they were in survival mode as a company. I think they had something really interesting, and when they really kind of focused and started working on Halo development and kind of like patching this game together, I believe they were a very creative studio, and I think they had the ability to make what Halo ended up becoming, which ultimately is one of the most influential video game franchises ever, especially in at least the modern era, which you could say the modern era of video games is probably like NES on, but I feel like another kind of like not breaking point, but splitting point would be the Gen 7 consoles, only because that's technically when like the internet started being introduced, like to the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. So I think that's something to kind of consider too, where like the modern, like the games of today, I feel like started with that generation. Like all of the ideas that became popular kind of started here. Even with the Dreamcast, I forgot it had a 56K modem. That's neither here nor there. So okay, they're making Halo. Holy smokes! So they gotta, all of their focuses now, from what Microsoft is telling them, is like, you got to finish this because we're gonna launch this product and we want Halo. And Microsoft was right, and Bill Gates was a lot more involved at the time here. So you'll see Bill Gates at the E3 announcements and everything like that. and he's on stage, announcing announcing Halo, announcing the Xbox cost, like he's up there. So Bill Gates was involved in this pretty heavily. And Microsoft, they were gutsy here because they knew they were going to lose money. So they were looking at the long term. So we're going to get this Halo franchise off. This is going to be our killer application. We're going to get people to buy these consoles, but we're going to lose money. And I think ultimately Microsoft lost $4 billion on the Xbox. There are not many companies that can pull this off. You literally just had Sega, restructure their entire company. And the only reason they didn't go belly up is their largest debt holder, upon his death, kind of forgave all of the debt they owed him. So they were in it to make this succeed or just be a complete and utter failure that would have lost even billions on top of that. But to lose $4 billion over the course of a console to get this done, that I can't believe like how insanely gutsy it was. And I didn't even like the Xbox at the time. I didn't like the Xbox, but they weren't messing around. They came in with, we're gonna do this, and they basically looked at the list of this is the stuff that we need to make this a success. We need a ton of capital. We need a killer intellectual property. We need a really strong console. Like we need to do this, and they pulled it off. It's absolutely crazy. So Halo launches, the first Halo, and they had to scrap some things with it. It was supposed to have an online component, which is why it was focusing on, Mac and, possibly PC at the time. I don't know if it would have come out on PC, but like the online, player was going to be a critical component here. But keep in mind that while PCs had shooters and had a lot of really popular shooters, and I think at this time they probably even had the shooters, unlike Doom, where, the original Doom, what a game, but like you can't aim, you know what I mean? So I believe there should have been some pretty prominent shooters out at this time where your mouse and keyboard, that's the layout, and consoles really just didn't have a way to control like PC did. And PC also had the ability to connect online where it was just like more popular there. LAN was another thing as well, which the Xbox could do as well. So you could see Microsoft kind of taking these ideas that have been successful in PC or have been things that people were interested in and brought them to their Xbox console space. So first and foremost, my first time interacting with Halo. Okay. So I had a GameCube, which funny enough, I worked a paper route at the time, and so like I just saved money for my paper route, and by the time it was like finally about time to get like the pizza shop job, I cashed out. They would put money away from the paper route to save your like every paycheck they'd put a little bit of money away. So I had enough money to go to Blockbuster, and I could only afford one console. So like if I'm going to do this, like I'm getting the one that I want, and I had a Nintendo 64, that was my previous console. I've loved Nintendo up until this point. So if I'm doing one, I did the Nintendo GameCube. It was also cheaper. I think it was $99 when I bought it, or maybe it was 150. But long story short, I go with that. So I have no real experience with the PlayStation. Like I've seen the PlayStation in person, but with the Xbox, it was a lot like the Dreamcast at the time. Like if you went to somebody's house and they had one, it was like intriguing to see because it wasn't the common console or the most successful console out there. People that bought it kind of were looking to specialize in something. So one of my close friends, he gets the Xbox and he's like, dude, this Halo game is absolutely incredible. So he's got Xbox fever. I'm trying to talk him into the Nintendo GameCube. I'm like, look how cool Smash is. He's like, look how cool Halo is. So I'll never forget in my living room, he was coming up to spend the night. We were just going to hang out all weekend and play Halo. And like, I've never really like interacted with this before. I've never really played like a shooter. Loosely, very, very loosely at this time. Like I might have seen somebody play it, or it might have been at like one of those like mall kiosks or Kmart kiosks, Walmart kiosks, whatever you call them, where like you look straight up, breaking your neck to play the video game consoles. Those were the best. You would have to look like completely straight up and like bust your neck just to see the tiny little screen to play the demo games. But yeah, I distinctly remember one time too, like I could see where our tastes were kind of like splitting a little bit, where I was playing Smash Brothers and like next to it they had the Xbox little demo kiosk, and he's playing. It was a fighting game. I cannot remember which one it was, but he's like, "Oh, you got to check this out." I'm like, "Oh, you got to check this out." But like neither of us are like putting the controllers down to go check the other game out. I was like, "Dude, Smash is awesome." He's like, "Dude, I don't know if it was like Tekken or no, it wouldn't have been Soul Calibur. I don't think. Dead or Alive, maybe a Dead or Alive fighting game. There was an early fighting game I can't recall. Um, but so he's coming up this weekend, right? And I remember, like where I lived, there was a Domino's Pizza basically like across the street. So I knew we could have pizza pretty quickly. And the way the layout was, I just kind of like told my mom, I'm like, listen, I'm moving the couch, and it's gonna be right smack dab in the center of everything, and I'm sorry. And we set up the TV, he hooked up his Xbox, and I'm looking at this thing. First of all, the Xbox, that console is huge. I remember like joking about that because coming from the GameCube, like it has like a nice little handle. Basically, it looks like a purse, which I love the design of it. But it's like this small square little console. The Xbox was like a freaking desktop. And I remember, as a quick side story, one of my other friends, he said he's like Walmart or Toys R Us or something, and a kid asks for an Xbox, and it might have been his birthday or something. So like parents take him out, and they pay for it, and you got to carry the console out, right? You're not going to put that big old box in a bag or anything like that. So the kid's like, hand it to me, and he's like, the guy's like, are you sure you got it? And he like hands him this console and like almost smashes the kid. The kid's like, like this is so huge. So that was my first impression of the Xbox. That thing was like unbelievably large. I remember it was we didn't have good ventilation. It was like sitting on the carpet on the living room floor. But I was like, what the heck? And he had two controllers. So for those that don't know about the Xbox controller and why one, it was so important for Halo is you needed the dual joysticks. But two, they I think the nickname of the controller is the Duke, and it's just absolutely like the biggest controller I've ever seen. So it was so large and unwieldy and uncomfortable. Now I don't think I have the Duke original Xbox controller anymore. But they ended up remodeling the controller. That was like the number one feedback, is like this thing is like big and bulky, and like what the heck is going on? And I remember he had two controllers. He had that one, and then he had the remodeled Slim controller, which I actually, that was a solid controller, and that design is kind of what became like the Xbox 360's design, with some like cleanup and like thinning out and stuff. But I just remember we were playing Halo together. So not only am I playing a first person shooter with two joysticks, which was like unheard of, I'm playing with this like gigantic controller, and I'm like, dude, I'm like, I had to tell him at one point, I was like, I can barely hold this thing. And he's like, well, I'm fine with it. He's like, here, use this one. So I was like, dude, you're the best. So we ended up switching controllers. But I just remember like split screen, first person controller mode. Your one joystick runs your character around, the other one is how they look. And that's how like you shoot. And it took some getting used to. Now it sounds completely natural, and it sounds like you would be a crazy person if you could think of literally any other design for consoles. But you have to think that there weren't really first person shooters at that juncture. Not saying that there weren't on consoles, but you would find them a lot more so in the PC gaming crowd, because honestly, the mouse and keyboard was just a better fit for those types of experiences. So to try to take that experience and replicate it to a gamepad or a controller, there had to be some work done, and there was a learning curve. Now that learning curve isn't quite there anymore. You got Fortnite's extremely popular. Like, I'm sure any kid could basically pick up a controller and, run around in an open space now in a first person environment, and that shouldn't be an issue, or a third person environment. But at the time, I just remember I was like, this is kind of complicated. There's a lot of buttons here. Like you pick up weapons, switch weapons, press buttons, throw grenades, turn the flashlight on. Like there was a lot to kind of like pick up and learn. But I remember as we started playing, and we have that couch kind of like catty corner in my living room, there's Domino's pizza on the floor. And now I never eat and game at the same time. So like I always like make sure I wash my hands. But, in between like a match, or in between like we're taking a break or something like that, chomp down some some Domino's pizza from that night, and wash your hands, and, jump right back in. But I just remember like both sitting on the couch, and we're just we just sat there in my living room, starting with the first thing, and he had played Halo at this point already. So it was kind of nice because, he can kind of carry me. So one of the coolest things about the Halo franchise was the cooperative play. So the online multiplayer, like combat version of the original Halo, was scrapped because Xbox Live wasn't ready yet. So first and foremost, they removed multiplayer, and that was going to be a huge selling point of what Halo 2 would become. So it had to be co-op. So couch co-op, LAN co-op. I'm pretty sure you could take a LAN cable and plug another Xbox in directly, and I'm pretty sure that would work. Which we ended up like doing that another time, which was really fun. But long story short, split screen, kind of like GoldenEye, and you're just running around. There's two Master Chiefs just blasting through Covenant aliens and like exploring this world. And the thing that stuck out most to me, outside of the first person experience and this new control scheme and everything like that, was how open it was. So Bungie did have to remove levels, and like, I don't want to say the development of Halo was rushed, but it was a big focus, and they needed this ready for the launch of the Xbox. Like, that was not going to happen for it to not be, a launch game. Like, they needed to release a console and have at least one game that was the must-have game when you picked up that console, and that's what Halo was, right? So I remember how open world it is. So there's you have your beginning scene where you're in space, and the Covenant are boarding, and they're this crazy alien species that are made up of like multiple different alien species. So you have like your little grunts; those guys are easy to kill. Then you have your elites, which are like they're stronger warriors. And then there's elites. I think jackals. I'm pretty sure jackals are in the first one. They're weird little things. And then you have like hunters and everything like that, which it's all very fascinating. But seeing after you kind of go down, so you exit the ship, right? And you go on to what ends up being a halo. So it's this gigantic, like planet-sized ring that is just like floating in space. But when you land on it, and it just looks like you're on Earth, or you're on some type of like environment like that. Like, you're looking around, there's trees, there's a ton of open space. That was just a wild experience. Was like, you walk out and you're looking around and you're like, whoa. And then you just see like a Covenant ship fly overhead, and you're like, well, that's not good. I'm just holding this like little, like assault rifle, yeah, or I'm just holding a shotgun, or I'm just holding this like alien weapon. Like, I'm just chilling, and this huge giant ship just like passes over you, and off in the distance you'll see it start unloading, Covenant personnel, and you can go that direction. You can try to like sneak around them on the other side because it was large. So it had a sandboxy type experience. Now, I'm not saying that it's the sandbox style of more modern day Grand Theft Autos. Grand Theft Auto. I think even like 3 was pretty large, but any of the modern ones where you have those giant 3D worlds, you can kind of like run around and do what you want. But it definitely had never been done in the console space before. And one of the coolest memories I have of that night and playing Halo was, you're on that ring and you look up and you just see the ring going off in the distance, like up above you, and it just seemed like it went on forever. So you're like, how big is this thing? What is this? Like, it was just absolutely fascinating. So when I say like sandboxy, it's like there's different ways to kind of approach those open world fights. So as you're on that ring, it's a lot of it looks very similar, so it's kind of easy to get lost. That's another thing, is you kind of have to like remember where you're at and like what your mission is and where to kind of go, because there were plenty of times where we got lost up on the open world and everything like that. And we're like, I think we came from this way already. But in Halo 1, I believe as long as one of you lived, I'm pretty sure, as long as one of you lived, you could continue to the next respawn point. So that was one of the fun things of Halo, which Halo 2 made it a lot more difficult. Halo 2 is kind of like notorious for its difficulty, but in the first Halo, so if you're playing like 2-player co-op and you're battling through, and one of you like gets killed by a grenade or something like that, as long as you can wrap up the fight and get to the next save or checkpoint, it would reload your character so you wouldn't lose progress. So you both had to die. So it's basically you guys, so 2 couch co-op buddies against the Covenant horde, and later on a different alien species horde as well. And it was just absolutely fascinating. Like, I was from the moment we started, I was like, this is a unique experience. And up until this point, I'm mainly an RPG type player, or I'll play Nintendo games or like Zelda. But this just kind of threw me a curveball because there was just so much to this experience that was new and really refreshing, and ultimately ended up laying the groundwork for the success of the Xbox 360 and the Western style game and first person shooters. Like they just exploded in popularity basically after Halo's success, and everybody was trying to find the next Halo. So Sony announces Killzone to try to fight Halo, and like, this is our killer app shooter. Like, everybody basically wanted one, probably outside of Nintendo. But what's really cool about the engagements in Halo 2, or Halo as well, excuse me, is you can pick up any weapon that falls. So Master Chief kind of becomes known as this character that's extremely resourceful, and he'll get the job done, like, however, whenever, wherever. And one of the cool things about that is, like, you go into a skirmish and say you have the assault rifle, which the assault rifle in the original Halo was hilarious. It had like a 60 magazine clip, and it was just like, it just never stopped firing. It just was fully automatic, just like, and just hearing the sound of it in the original Halo 2 is just like such a great sound. But so you run out of ammo, you can go and pick up another weapon, including Covenant weapons. And I think one of the things that Bungie did really, really well is making all of the weapons of Halo feel special and unique, and they have their own purpose, and they almost have like their own cult following as well. Because the pistol, and I don't know if this has changed since, but the pistol of Halo 1 was just absolutely insane. So I don't know the damage output, like, I didn't look this up beforehand, but that weapon was just absolutely insane. And I don't think it was supposed to be as strong as it was, and I think Bungie tried to go back and make it, fix it because it was wildly accurate. So it had a zoom reticle, and it was just so accurate. And if you did headshots on enemies that didn't have shields, it was instant kill. So you always will, if there was a human pistol available, you grab the pistol. That's just how it is. Like, you can have anything else you want as a backup, but most people, especially like in Halo multiplayer, when you're doing the LAN stuff, you switch to your pistol unless you're like right on them, and then maybe use the assault rifle and just gun butt them. But you run out of ammo, you can, in these engagements, just pick up another item. Pick up, a needler, which was so many weapons in Halo have just like become so popular and like, I don't, like, mainstream, I guess you would say, like really well known, like the needler with the shoots the pink needles, you land a bunch of them, it explodes. Like, all of the weapons were just really interesting and usable and just enjoyable. So you might, depending on if you're fighting a lot of enemies and you walk in without, so many great weapons, like if the big weapons, like the rocket launcher, the sniper rifle, even the shotgun, I would say, like, if you don't have these, then you're grabbing, something else. But generally those items have, limited rounds, so you could find yourself switching out weapons and picking up new weapons as you go. I always really liked that because, like, you could use the alien weapons and you could use the human weapons, and you're not really like at a disadvantage, or you're not in a situation where you're like, well, I just don't like this. Like, most of the weapons in Halo I ended up coming to really like. I think, I don't know if there was dual wielding. I think dual wielding came in Halo 2, but this experience too, it's a story-based game. So you have this Master Chief character, which, if you like sci-fi, the backstory of the Spartan program. So Master Chief is a Spartan. I think the last one at this point. I don't think there's any other Spartans. So the game kind of starts off, and they're basically treating him like cargo. They're like, "Hey, wake up the chief!" Like, he's on the ship, like, basically in stasis. He's like frozen. They got to wake him up because the Covenant are boarding the ship, and they're like, "We need our guy." But they're basically like super soldiers that were genetically enhanced. And I might have read one of the books a while ago, but I think some of the media, after that has kind of given his backstory a bit more. But one cool thing, the gentleman who plays his voice, I wish I had this off the top of my head. I didn't prepare this, but the Master Chief's voice is just like perfect, and it's a great example of creating a character that feels badass, that feels really cool. And they do it without explaining too much. So you know he's awesome. He's the last Spartan. He's like 7 feet tall in this giant mech suit. Has a shield on his armor, and he just runs around and he's just known for like wrecking stuff and taking care of business. And he doesn't talk that much. So he is partnered with an AI called Cortana. So she's on like a little chip. He like sticks her in his helmet, and she kind of gives you updates and everything like that. But most of the time, Master Chief doesn't have a lot to say, and that kind of like led to his coolness too. You have this like awesome sci-fi space armor. This guy that always like completes the mission and has an awesome voice. You never see his face. Another great choice, which I know they've kind of dipped their toes in this with a little bit. And I think there's a TV show at this point which just kind of shows Chief's face, but they did a really good job of like making the armor and making the persona of Master Chief more important than the character, larger than life. Because a person, if he takes off his helmet all the time and he just stops wearing his helmet in all the games, and you it changes it. Like that little bit of mystery kind of keeps it intriguing. His lack of emotion to a certain degree, it's just like, okay, like I need a gun. I'm gonna go do this. Let's go. We got to get to this. Okay, he's always focused on the next task, and that lack of emotion, that not showing his face, it's just really interesting and keeps you kind of engaged into the mystery of who the heck is this guy that I'm playing as. Like I feel awesome because I'm just plowing through Covenant and all that stuff, and like I feel like a superhero. So I thought Microsoft did and Bungie too, like did a really good job of kind of crafting this character that became, I think at one point you could have said arguably bigger than the Xbox brand itself. And I know they were kind of synonymous with each other, but like I do think around Halo 2, Halo 3, like just he was just Master Chief was his own thing. You know what I mean? So that was all really interesting. So the sandboxy gameplay, picking up weapons, the different locales too. So what's cool is you'll be, in a cave system, you'll be in space, you'll be on ships, you'll be underground. Like you're dealing with a lot of really cool sci-fi stuff. So if you're a fan of, science fiction, the more that Halo's story kind of unravels, the more intriguing that it gets. And you're kind of watching, humans try to compete with these monsters to a certain degree, because some of them are like absolutely huge. So, as you're fighting the Covenant, I think we talked about, the different versions, but, you'll turn the corner and all of a sudden there's two hunters. So hunters, they look like these giant bug things with this blue armor, and they're like weird orange stringy looking bugs underneath that fit this armor, and they always hunt in pairs. So there's always two of them. So like anytime you roll into an environment, and they got shields, you'll throw grenades, they'll smash them away because they have this like giant shield. And if they get close up on you, they're just punching you one time. And if you're playing on legendary, like you absolutely have to maintain your distance and make sure that you're damaging them and use it. Like even with the most recent Halo that I played, anytime I encounter some of these, I'm like, all right, how many grenades do I got? Do I have explosives? Like I'm launching all the big stuff at these guys to get these guys out of the way because they drive you crazy. But yeah, like different enemy types, so they can really set up really unique engagements and experiences with all of this, and with that sandbox style. At this point, I just never experienced anything quite like it. Like there was just not. I cannot pick another game. Now you could now. You know what I mean? Like I think you could say, hey, Halo paved the way for Call of Duty and a bunch of other, modern shooter franchises, and I think that's a fair statement and something fair to say. But at that time, that experience was not there. And what's really interesting too, and this is kind of like another fun memory that I have about this, is there was no online in Halo 1 because the Xbox Live services I don't think had launched at the time, or they weren't ready for it, yada yada, okay? But you could play online together by, doing 4-player split screen co-op or using LAN cables. However, before Halo 2 came out, I distinctly remember there being a program that could mimic you being in the same room as somebody that's, online essentially. Yeah, so at this time, in the gaming industry, there was a lot of like couch, co-op where you guys are all cramming in front of a tiny TV, and all of the controllers were wired unless you had like a Wavebird or something like that. But we would be like jam packed playing Smash or like playing Halo together, and it was just an absolute blast. But with this program, you could mimic another group of like four players being in the same room as you, and the Xboxes would pretend that like they were connected. So essentially, you would hook your Xbox up to the computer, run this program, and you could find lobbies for Halo 1 using this program. And I had like I'm terrible with computers and everything like that. And keep in mind like the internet wasn't a thing. Like I distinctly remember at this time too. This is it's just an embarrassing memory. But I thought Windows 95 meant internet. So like I had no concept of what the internet was. No, Windows 95 is like, the operating system. That doesn't mean like you're connected to the internet. But like I just had no idea like what this even was. So we're all sitting there, and my friend at the time, who there's four of us in this tiny little room, like all around this TV, like having a blast, and he's like setting us all up, and it was absolutely crazy that he got it running. I think I remember his brother, like you always have that older brother who is like, "Hey, I'm the cool guy. I know what's going on, and like I've totally done this already." So he just like pops in, and he's like, "Oh yeah, do this, this, and this." But I remember we were going into lobbies and like doing 4v4 co-op, or excuse me, 4v4 like multiplayer battles on Halo 1 by connecting it to a computer and like running the software program. Now, to say there was latency or some lag was an understatement. And I just remember like going into this world, and that's when I really learned the power of the pistol, where it's just so accurate. Like we would load, and I would felt like I was dying immediately because I'm also playing on, you know, one regular sized TV being split into four screens. So I'm like, okay, like I this is already hard to see. And I just remember like at this point I'm dying so much, like almost instantly. Like I'm soon as I'm spawning, I'm just like getting shot a million times and dying. So I'm just loading with my two grenades and saying grenade, grenade, and just like chucking my grenades everywhere to get kills. And I'm loading grenade, grenade, throwing them, getting the kills and everything like that. And it was just complete an absolute pandemonium. It was just wild. It was freaking crazy. And I distinctly remember because like we're all in this room like crammed together. Everybody's like yelling. You're just being like loud kids playing Halo. Everybody's dying. I'm doing terrible. And I just remember hearing my buddy who set everything up. He was like, Who the heck's throwing all these grenades?" Because there was splash damage in Halo. So I'm like, at this point, one of my other friends is like, "I don't know, but BigReed's over here singing grenade, grenade." So I'm wondering, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I'm sorry guys, it's me. I'm like, I'm getting destroyed. So I'm just literally spawning, chucking my grenades, hopefully shooting a few rounds, and then dying. Um, I, what's interesting too is you could do this experience with Mario Kart as well. Because I remembered Mario Kart Double Dash, you could also do it as well. I don't know if it worked with Smash, but yeah, it was a blast. Like Halo just became known as, something that you did with your friends. And it's really good to see those types of experiences bringing people together. And it was really fun. You know what I mean? So you could do the co-op and, play the single player together, or, in later iterations of Halo, you could do, the multiplayer competitive kind of matches, which was also an absolute blast. But I don't know if anyone really remembers. Technically you could play Halo 1 online, not easily, and there was a ton of latency, but it could be done. And I just remember that experience. I was like, that was pretty cool. Like looking back, that's a neat experience to have. What's also interesting about Halo, and just a little odd with, the original, Halo for 1 through 3, there was actually a Halo DS. So a Halo Nintendo DS game. And that's another thing where, have you ever had a memory and nobody else seems to ever really talk about it? You never see it brought up, and you're just like, was that real? Did that happen? I don't know about that. Halo DS was one of them, because I remember going on, this was IGN.com, which I know they're still around, but at the time, the way that they would catalog their games, which I don't know if they still do this, is they would create the game. So if it was announced or shown, so, say Mario, Mario 64, and then you could go back and they would upload images in order. So I don't know if it's still done like this, because I remember the websites at the time, they were very like archaic. Like they would look very odd. Now it looked like early internet websites basically. But you could click back through. So if there was like say 300 images, as you would get from Image 300 all the way back to the original. The original would be the first one that was posted with the date and the timestamp and everything like that. But that's how I actually like double checked it. Is I went back and I was like, is this real? Because like I heard about it, but I was like, is this real? Yeah, there is a tech demo, I guess you would say, of a potential Halo game running on the DS, and they had I want to say it might have been one of the Halo 3 levels, Halo 2 or Halo 3 levels, where you have that big like circle. It almost looks like a fan, like in the center, and it looks like it's running on the DS. So if you guys look this up, it's definitely worth checking out and pretty cool. But be ready for it to look pretty close to like a Nintendo 64 game. But yeah, it's in the first person, and there's somebody with like the SMG weapon from might have been two. I can't remember when the SMG first came out. But yeah, like shooting somebody else. They're shooting one of the Covenant weapons, and it's there. And I ended up going on IGN like double checking it. This is like years ago, because I heard the rumors, and whatever it was, like it just ended up falling through. But the fact that it was almost a possibility for that to even exist is absolutely wild, because for the longest time, and it could be this way going forward, but I honestly believe that for at the time that this was a possibility, Microsoft might have been looking for ways to branch out. But I think essentially at that point they said, we're going to tighten it up. And, Nintendo keeps their IPs to themselves, which they've branched out. They've been letting like third party developers, work on some of their IPs like side by side with them. But it's like, this is our game, this is our intellectual property. Like, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't get touched. So they kind of shut that down, and now that has changed recently with Xbox Game Pass, which that could be the future of Halo. It seems like Sony is kind of maybe blocking Xbox Game Pass going on the PlayStation, but to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if you ended up ever seeing Master Chief on a different console, not exclusively as part of Xbox Game Pass, but it's possible. Where at this time it was, buttoned up. This is ours. If you want to play it, you got to buy an Xbox. But the fact that it almost came out on the Nintendo DS, whatever that experience would have been, I don't even know. There's probably technical limitations of trying to like crunch this down onto like basically a souped up 64 game. Um, so it never came to be, but even seeing it is just another weird memory of like the Halo experience possibly going to Nintendo's extremely popular portable game console at the time. So all very interesting. And then I think I'll just keep this podcast focused to kind of Halo 1, and I'll kind of talk about Halo 2 a little bit and what the franchise ended up becoming, because at the end of the day, Halo did have a pretty big impact on me. It kind of broadened my horizons to play games that I might not have played before, because I like role playing games. I like Nintendo games. I like puzzle games. I like basically everything except sports games, unless they're like really fun or like Mario Soccer or something. But shooters weren't something that I like really played. You know what I mean? Like I didn't. I personally, I don't think I owned GoldenEye on the 64. One of my buddies owned a copy, so we'd always play it together. But like even like Perfect Dark on the 64, like I didn't play too much. On the GameCube, shooters weren't really that much of an option. So it's just like it never happened. I was happy playing the games that I was playing, but Halo kind of helped broaden my horizons, because, what ended up coming to be is those action games, those first person shooters exploded in popularity, and some of the biggest games of the following generation, you know, were your Call of Duties, were your Grand Theft Autos, like they were just huge, you know what I mean? And it's not something that I would have played before. And I think there is a beauty to Halo. Now, I think it's a lot less now because Halo kind of isn't the juggernaut that it once was. Not saying it's not popular, but I would say Call of Duty for the following generation, after kind of Halo 3, I would say kind of took over just in popularity. Like, Modern Warfare 2 was just absolutely huge. They would release a Call of Duty game and it would sell 20 plus million copies like every stinking year. And there was just so many players constantly playing it. Like there was no issues with finding matches, where you log into Halo Infinite now and there's just not that same player base. So it's interesting how it changed. And I would say like Fortnite and other games like that too. And those what would you call them? Like not MOBAs, but kind of similar where it's like 5v5, like shooting games where like the characters have like powers and stuff like that. I'm like blanking on like Overwatch is one of them. There's a few not Anthem. There's a few other ones, but I apologize for that for people that are you know that enjoy those games. But you know Halo kind of paved the way for a lot of those experiences though, and I do think there is a beauty to especially the Bungie portion of Halo games. I like the stories are kind of bittersweet. They're not always happy. The situations are dire. Like if you're looking for everything to be hunky dory, that's not always the case. And they did a really great take on science fiction and incorporating aliens, but putting it into the future. But it's also interesting. That's one of the things that stuck out about early Halo to me is it was like the year 2600 maybe I remember being like hundreds of years into the future, and we're like space traveling and all that stuff, but we're still using like weapons we would probably use today. I thought that was kind of interesting. So you think they would have maybe adapted or changed, or maybe I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong, but it's just an interesting experience. And I feel like science fiction and Halo kind of abides by this as well. It always gets to what's next. Like what is the point of organic life? And Halo has an answer. And other like the Matrix and like other experiences like that. There's answers to it. You know what I mean? Mass Effect. But there is a beauty to Halo, and I feel like the perception of your average Halo player wasn't that great. And to be honest, the Halo Bros and everything like that could have been maybe a little true for some of them at the time. But I remember I was in the military, and this was when Halo 3 was launching. And I think we were being released because it was launching on a Friday, and I was going to like basically after the military day, go pick up a copy of it. But I distinctly remember them opening up like, okay, what does anyone have? Anyone have? And I'm like, just a heads up, Halo is launching this day. Just giving everyone a heads up, and everybody's just like, okay, you're being a goofball. But it was just a great experience, and it really reshaped the modern portion of the video game industry and paved the way to the experiences that you see today. And I think there's a lot of creativity with like online gaming in general, a lot of different ideas with like Among Us, Fortnite, etc. But it's really interesting kind of seeing like a company like Microsoft buy their way in and say, listen, the internet and online play is going to be the future, and come heck or high water, we're going to take our killer application and show everybody. Sega might have started it, but Microsoft kind of paved the way for what the modern video game industry kind of would become. And what's interesting too is I feel like with the explosion of these types of games on consoles, it kind of gave a rebirth to PC as well, because now with like PC, you were kind of stuck to what you have. But if you have Steam, like you have access to so many games that are on consoles as well. And, PC kind of became like a very, it was already a popular platform, but I feel like it became even more popular and has even more content than before, which is already pretty crazy. So it was an absolute great experience. It was really fun and amazing to be able to experience, these types of video games playing together. Because with the original Halo Combat Evolved, it reminds me of times that I spent with friends, completing or doing something together. And at the end of the day, that's really kind of what I feel like the video game industry is about, telling your story, making engaging experiences, and ultimately trying to bring people together. So I won't go too much into the later Halos. I'm going to save that for a future podcast based upon the length of this one. However, if you haven't played the original Halo and you can do it on the original hardware, awesome. If you can't, you can do it on the Halo remakes or with Xbox Game Pass. I still highly recommend playing it. It's still an enjoyable experience, and it's really cool to play the original Halo and then play Halo Infinite and see what has changed about the series and what's been polished up and like what's different. But it's also really interesting when you go back and you play the first Halo. Remember that there was nothing like it at the time. So any experience that you've had, say recently, like in the past 5 years, like with a different shooter or something like that, you can play that experience and be like, wow, this is where they got a lot of the ideas from. So it's a really interesting experience, and I have very fond memories of Halo. And I hope that you guys go out and look up Halo DS. Make sure I'm not crazy. You're gonna be like, hey, this is a fan made thing. This wasn't even real. But yeah, the original. It's worth checking out if you've never played it, and if you're not in, because this podcast is going to focus a lot on your RPGs and probably games more so like that. This might be kind of just like a side note, you know what I mean? Like going into the shooter realm. But I would like to do a part two of the Halo franchise, Bungie exiting development and 343 taking up the helm. And now, where Halo is at now and where, the video game industry, kind of has gone and what has changed since then. And, the lasting impact that kind of Halo left. But I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. This is another episode of Gaming's Lost Memories, and I am your host, BigReed, and I look forward to talking to you again.